Hello and welcome back to HR Stew. My name is Regina Dyerly.
And I'm Holly Knowles.
And this is HR Stew.
The American Psychiatric Association defines post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, as a psychiatric disorder that may occur in people who have experienced or witnessed a traumatic event, series of events, or set of circumstances. An individual may experience this as emotionally or physically harmful, and it may affect mental, physical, social, or spiritual well-being. While PTSD is often associated with military service members, it can occur in all people who have experienced an event or set of circumstances perceived as traumatic. Today we're diving into a topic that's both sensitive and incredibly important: post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, stemming from traumatic work situations. Whether it's the result of a toxic work environment, harassment, or burnout, the impact can be long-lasting, affecting not just professional life, but personal well-being. Today we have a special guest with us, Chelsey Moore. Chelsey, with over 10 years of experience in human resources, currently serves as an HR business partner at Vita HR. Welcome, Chelsey.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Welcome.
To start off today's discussion, I have a question. HR professionals are often on the front line of the most difficult workplace situations. So, in your experience, what are some of the specific challenges that HR professionals face that might lead to PTSD?
I think that, daily we interact with people that are going through difficult situations, and HR is often the arbiter of, what's right and wrong in the workplace, but we have to reconcile that with what people are going through on the outside of the workplace. So it can be really difficult to have to lay down the law when you know that someone's having a difficult issue outside.
That's really true. For me, sometimes not here, luckily, but at, previous employers, dealing with some of the politics and some of the things that we have to ourselves roll out that we don't agree with or don't believe in, or just some of the unjust things that happen in the workplace that you can't stop from happening, even if you're trying. I think I've had many, many sleepless nights over scenarios like that.
I agree. And I had somebody when I first started here actually told me that HR is a marriage psychiatrist, a personal psychiatrist. And it's a lot to, especially for people who internalize things that, and you empathize with employees and staff. It's a lot to take on sometimes and internalize and lose sleep over what the other person's going through.
Absolutely. And you don't have a choice other than to do it.
Yes.
And we want to do it, and we want to do it well on top of it, right? So you just shove your own personal feelings. Like Holly walked in today incredibly overwhelmed. She just got back from a few days off on personal, trip. We just do what we need to do and put, our own feelings aside a lot of times.
The show must go on.
Right. We have to be strong and all those things and available,
yes.
For everybody.
Mm-hmm.
To further our discussion today, I'd like you all to reflect on a moment in your HR career when you encountered a particularly difficult or emotionally challenging situation. And sharing only what you're comfortable with, of course, how did that experience impact you personally and professionally?
The first thing that does come to mind for me, and I think about it regularly, it's actually two different situations, but they were both deaths that we had to deal with in the workplace. One was this young shining star who literally just got a promotion. Like, we just sent out the announcement, his next scheduled day at work, he did not show up and he overdosed. He talked a lot about his recovery, and he was doing so well. And his mother came in. I had like these two love seats I get chills. I still think about it. And she told me his whole story, why she felt like he became an addict. Like, he had an event that happened in elementary school, where he brought a knife into school to show, like, he just, it was just a thing, and they had a zero tolerance, and they called the cops. They ended up in juvie over it. His mother was like a 30-year retired cop on top of it, and so she told me the whole story. And I went to the funeral, as we do in HR, and I wanted to be there. But I don't know. I've thought about that situation. But that's the first one. And again, I probably think about him and his mom, wondering how his mom is, probably at least once a month, right? I mean, now, this is years and years later. And then at the same company, we had this wonderful veteran who joined He had been deployed several times. We knew his whole story from from when we interviewed him. And it was a call center, and I didn't know why he was not trying to go for something more experienced. But one day I was walking by, and he's taking calls, and he has a baby carrier under his desk because his wife had gotten held up at work late, and he didn't want to be late. So he just put the baby, who was like 6 months old, under his desk, and and she was just sitting there. She was awake.
Oh my
She was
gosh.
beautiful. I walked by, we took the baby, and I was like, can I put her in my office? And she was like a doll. The chubby cheeks, she had silky black little curls, and she was just a doll. And then like a month later, the police came, and she died of SIDS. And
Oh, no.
I'm like, they came to work because he worked a night shift to tell him, and they brought him out. He was like, I went to that funeral, and if you want to be traumatized, the perfect little pink casket that little girl was in, I think about that. And looking at him and his then wife, they did not make it. Their marriage did not survive.
Yeah.
I apologize. He worked there until I left. Like, we took care of him, we made sure, but he was never okay. And I don't know if he's okay today, probably.
I don't know how you can be.
But I think about that. I think about how many people liked him and how many other people showed up at that funeral at work. His grief, trying to manage his grief, trying to find good outcomes for him at work. We made sure he got promoted into an IT position. Like, he earned it, don't get me wrong, but we made sure that he felt encouraged to apply when I don't think he would have. Like, we tried to do good things for him. I think about him. I wonder how he is. I don't know. I think that those and there was other deaths, but those two, 8 years, 10 years later, I'm still thinking about these people.
How did that experience impact you personally or professionally? Or those experiences?
Professionally, I think, I don't know if you could ever get used to, especially when you're working in an environment like that, where, a coworker dies, where it's someone that you see on the regular, I don't know if I could answer that. I don't know if I have an eloquent answer to say how that impacted me. I just think it did. And I think it did change me a little bit. And I definitely did not get empathy fatigue or anything like that. Like, that stuff is just real life and terrible and unfair and unjust. And
even you saying that you still think about him monthly, that's a big impact on your life. And
I don't want to say his name, but I just think he would have had a really bright future.
yeah.
And he just was a light,
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's hard in those professional relationships when you can't really follow up, right?
Yeah.
Because you only knew them on this
Right.
level of life. And so all these years later, you still wonder. And it's just kind of this open wound.
It's true. I mean, like, I would recognize his mother even today. I would love to know how she's doing. I did keep up with the other gentleman for a while. Not that he knew it, but yeah, that's true. My husband works in the hospital. He works in a NICU, and sometimes he'll tell me a story, and then none of us will ever know the outcome. It's like, you just don't know. You're just left wondering and hoping for the best.
Yeah.
Maybe veering off a little bit, but
That's probably for the best.
well, I've always thought of, particularly empathetic HR people as if you've ever heard the term scar eater. So a scar eater is someone in like Italian and Roman tradition that would sit over a body that had died and kind of anoint the body with oil and eat bread over the body and just kind of absorb all of the sins of the life of that person. And that, I feel like in a lot of ways, a lot of times that's kind of what we do in a very, maybe it's a little dark, but we're kind of the people there that are to absorb all of this negativity and then create opportunities out of that.
I like that.
Me too. I'd never heard that term before.
Yeah.
Me either. I really like that. So mine is a personal story. About 3 years ago, there was a lady who was 31 years old, a single mom, and working, it's 2021, so towards still in COVID times, and worked in the medical field, doing scheduling, MA, all of that stuff. And she was working 60 to 70 hours a week, trying to raise a baby by herself, all of those things. And then at 31, she had passed away suddenly, and her 4-year-old daughter went and ran down to get her neighbor to call the police because her mom had passed out on the bed. It just makes you really think, is working 60, 70 hours a week really, really worth that. And, anything to say, I've worked my way up in my career and I've gotten to this place that I really want to be in, but now I'm not here anymore to help raise my daughter and to, do all of the things that I wanted to get to see, watch her graduate high school, watch her, have a wedding. And I think the culture at that time, there weren't a lot of people applying for jobs, and especially in the medical field, and everything was so scarce that everybody had to pick up all these extra pizzas and all this extra work just to make sure the job got done and the patients were taken care of. And it was, to the detriment of this employee.
It's hard.
That is hard. And no, it's never worth it. I mean, that's just the truth, but you can't tell people that in the moment, right? I mean, some people are pleasers too. They don't want to say no.
Agreed. So for those who are pleasers, it's kind of, you have to, when things like this happen, you have to take a step back. Like, what's most important? My work colleagues are going to remember me probably, once a month for the rest of their lives. However, my children, my parents, my siblings, they're going to, there's going to be a piece of their lives that they're missing out on.
Has that made you kind of more aware of how much energy you're putting in?
I wish weekly? I could say yes. I will say I am a little bit better as I've gone along the 5 years here at Vita. And plus my children are getting older and I don't want to miss things, of saying I'm going to take time and go watch a volleyball game or go watch a soccer game, because I'm not going to get that moment back.
That's right.
And I will say I am better at that.
I don't think you ever missed that stuff.
I have missed things in the past.
Okay, because you're like super mom over there,
I have missed things in the past, and I also have tried to consciously be present, because I know there are some times in the past where I'm answering emails or on the phone or doing something and not fully present. I try.
That's all we could do.
Yeah.
Well, mine happened more recently. I worked for a company that grew very, very quickly. We had a head of HR that at first all really valued and loved, and she made each one of us feel specifically and especially important. We'll say Amy is the head of HR. And then as we kind of settled into the company, some of us just started to notice some iffy things about her relationships with other employees, about things that just weren't getting done, that should be getting done. And we ended up opening up an investigation against her. I was having a meeting with her over the phone one day. Amy had a compatriot who was one of the directors of HR. Neither of them liked my coworker. We'll call her Sandra, was pregnant. And Amy told me very proudly that she told the director of HR, wait until Sandra has the baby and then you can go ahead and kick her ass. And this was someone that we had all looked up to and loved and valued. And because this young pregnant woman had said something that they didn't like and questioned Amy's leadership, she didn't want her to be, even safe anymore. So we all individually brought this up to the CEO. And after months, and I mean months, it was 6 months of requesting an investigation. Finally, they opened up an investigation once I wrote an email to the chief legal officer. And after the investigation, found that there was enough proof to ask the head of HR to resign, which she did, and then gave me some choice words in a phone call afterward. However, we had 16 people in the HR department, and half of them were my teammates, and then the other half were really, really pro Amy. And so it was a good 8 months of just terror walking into the office of, are people going to just refuse to work? Are they going to call us names? Are they going to shut doors in our faces? We have to have collaborative meetings. And it was just very, very ugly for a very long time. And I would say, we had layoffs, and unfortunately, most of those people were laid off and my team was kept. And as grateful as I am for that, it still feels very ugly looking back on that and those relationships that were absolutely ruined by a really toxic leader.
That's really tough.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you experienced that.
Well, thank you. It's definitely made me more aware of the people that, I see as mentors, and made me much more risk averse in creating relationships. And I'm more aware now, I think, of, not just taking someone for their word.
It's really hard. I mean, it's especially hard, I think, when the toxic leader is in HR. So that's like a double whammy.
Right. HR can sometimes, I think, be seen as like the hysterical women's department, right? And so when there are problems within HR, it's not necessarily taken seriously.
Right.
And that was really, really, I think, a difficult part of this process, because I feel if it had been in the IT department or any other department, that leader would have been gone.
Why didn't you send the letter to the chief legal officer before the CEO? Or
we felt that, our CEO was kind of a friend to us all. And we
Right.
really felt like going to him would be, like a friendly way to resolve it. But he really just didn't want to participate in it at all. And so after going to him and him shaking his finger a couple of times, we finally discovered, we need to just we need someone else in charge to take a look at this.
Did he like her? Is that why?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're still friends to this day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, if we hadn't gotten legal involved, she would still be there and we would have all been fired.
Right. And you gave us one example. I'm sure there was many,
Oh my
many,
gosh, there were
many.
so
Yeah.
many. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, legally, I probably shouldn't.
Right. No.
discuss some of them.
I just wanted to make note that
Yeah,
it's not just
there were a
one
lot.
thing.
Yeah,
If she
absolutely.
was asked to resign.
That was kind of my point of something needs to be done. about
Right.
this.
Right.
Thank you so much for sharing. So in hindsight, do you feel that the workplace environment or culture contributed to the intensity of those situations? And how do you think a workplace culture can contribute to being the cause of PTSD in workers?
In my example, I don't think it played in specifically. It might have made it more intense because he was part of the largest group of the workforce, which was the call center, and people felt very attached to him before and after, right? But, and I'm not going to speak for you, Chelsey, but in your case, had it been taken serious earlier, you would have had a totally different experience, right? So your culture there, even though the leader was toxic, your CEO was also toxic because of him not actually advocating for a whole team of people who were being adversely impacted by one of his leaders. That completely soured your experience.
Absolutely. It definitely was an example of cronyism. That old school, like, I don't want what they're doing to reflect on me, so let's just ignore what's going on. You guys just need to be quiet and do your jobs. And that happens all the time, I think.
oh yeah,
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, it does.
Yeah, and I think, again, with having the problem take place in the HR department, HR sets the culture. And so having an HR department that's failing, I mean, not just perceptively failing, but absolutely failing, impacted the culture of the whole company. And I think that moved back around to us. If the people that they're supposed to trust and that are supposed to be the torchbearers aren't able to do that, then what chance do they have of having a healthy department? And so we lost a lot of trust in our department and really had to rebuild that again.
But even more than that, like your day to day, I mean, so you're dealing with all the stresses of the regular job that you do, right? Being an HR person, dealing with all the stuff that you do as an HR person. Then you have the dynamic of the team discourse and feeling nervous about maybe even coming to work. And then you feel like you're failing on top of it. So you're not even able to absorb yourself in the good work that you're doing. So that's just a perfect storm of creating a very high stress environment.
Yes, definitely.
So for the sake of this next question, I'm going to read off some symptoms according to the American Psychiatric Association of PTSD. So we're going to start off with intrusion, which is intrusive thoughts such as repeated involuntary memories. Number 2 is avoidance, which is avoiding reminders of the traumatic event that may include avoiding people, places, activities, objects, and situations that may trigger distressing memories. Another is alterations in cognition and mood, which means difficulty remembering key details of the trauma, leading to negative and distorted beliefs about oneself or others, misplaced blame, persistent feelings of fear, anger, guilt, or shame. And finally, alterations in reactivity, such as being irritable or having angry outbursts, behaving recklessly in a self-destructive way, being overly watchful of one's surroundings in a suspecting way, so paranoia generally, being easily startled, or having problems concentrating or sleeping. Knowing that, in what ways have you seen these symptoms surface in the workplace, whether it be in yourself or your coworkers?
these symptoms surfacing in the workplace, you never know what somebody else is going through, but especially in the environment that Chelsey spoke about, where they were closing doors and not speaking to her, it could lead to outbursts. It could lead to coming into work and being asked a simple question like, how was your day? And then somebody just screaming and yelling and flying off the handles.
I'm sorry. I just thought there was this wonderful woman who I'm still friends with. I'm going to say her name because I know she wouldn't mind. Her name is Casey, and she is one of the most positive people I ever met. And her desk, her cubicle was by the door. And every day that I walked in, she said, good morning, good morning, Regina. And I said, hey, good morning, Casey, how are you? And she'd be like, blessed and highly favored every morning. And then one morning I was really, really grumpy. And for some reason, her saying that blessed and highly favored thing just did not sit right with me. And I was like, oh, for Pete's sake, Casey, bring it down 5 notches. How about, and then I felt really bad. I went back later. I was like, I'm sorry. Sometimes positivity is also toxic.
That's a little too much. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, especially if you're having a bad day and you go into work and everybody's bubbly and you're like, I just need a minute.
She was at a 12 all the time, and she still is. I believe it.
Oh, wow.
That's just how she rolls. Some people are just like that, but some days you're just not.
Yeah.
You're negative.
Right. Fair.
And it doesn't make up for you being negative. It just pushes you farther in.
Right. And I'm a coffee. Yeah.
That's fair. There's sometimes my family has this warped way of dealing with traumatic issues. We laugh. My mother will even tell you I can laugh and cry at the same time, which is really weird. But it's either I'm going to become a recluse and go home and hide, or I'm going to laugh at situations that are the most improper moments to laugh. That, even my daughter, she'll be like, Mom, if I fall down, you're just going to laugh at me. No, I really don't know of any other reaction when things are just chaotic all around me. And then to add one more thing, all you can do is laugh sometimes.
Absolutely.
So in general, how do you think employers can identify and support employees experiencing those symptoms of PTSD in the workplace?
I think one of the biggest things is to be empathetic, and you never know what somebody else is going through at home. You never know what burdens they're bearing as they walk through the door, is to really be empathetic. And if you can, hey, what's going on today? Are you okay? And really be a listening ear for somebody. Because sometimes just people need an outlet to vent or to just say, I need somebody to just listen to me so I can get this off my chest. There's a lot going on right now. So just be empathetic.
Yeah, I think that's so valuable. And I think that it starts with having that safe space, right? Having created that safe space so that when people feel whatever way they feel, they know that they can come to you, and that HR isn't just somewhere to go when you're getting written up, but it's somewhere to go where you can just chat, where you can, have a candy, where you can sit and drink a soda and take a walk outside.
So next I want to introduce the concept of vicarious trauma, which is defined as the emotional residue of exposure to traumatic stories and experiences of others through work, witnessing fear, pain, and terror that others have experienced, a preoccupation with horrific stories told to the professional, and that comes from the American Counseling Association. Can you share some examples of how vicarious trauma might affect someone specifically working in HR and how they may be predisposed to it?
I think I've talked about this on the previous podcast, but mine is the March of 2020, going around to all of our different clients and having to sit in on all of these layoffs and just seeing fear on, so many employees' faces. We would have HR meetings and it was just a check-in, like internally, of how are you? How is everything going? And I think there were some times it's like, I just need a mental break, or I'm going to break down. And even personally, my husband's been laid off at the most inopportune times of our lives. So I had empathy. I understood where they were coming from. Like, how am I going to support myself? How am I going to support my kids? That was my biggest vicarious trauma I can think of to date.
You said the word empathy a bunch of times, and I know I'm veering off as I do. But I think compassion fatigue is something that I have experienced. I absolutely experienced it at my last company. We were just dealing with so many different issues, and because we were a second chance employer as well, people didn't have transportation. They didn't have money for lunch. They didn't have, we were trying to solve so many different problems while people were at work. I just think you just get, it's so mentally exhausting. Even though you want to do all the good things, sometimes it's like there's no where am I in all this sometimes,
Yeah, I'll echo that absolutely. I actually had to lay myself off of my last company. We went through 3 layoffs and had to lay off every single person in the company till there were just 3 of us left in HR, and then we all sent each other the letters, But yeah, I mean, thinking of all of the effect that just writing this letter, that's all you're doing, right? Is you're just writing a letter and sending it out to someone, but the effect that it has on their life, that sticks with me for sure.
I mean, taking someone's livelihood away is no little thing. Mm-mm. Like, people that say it's just business. This is not just business. This is people's lives.
Right.
And so that's why, earlier when I talked about the politics sometimes, not in a situation like yours where everybody's getting laid off, but when you're looking at a layoff list and you're like, how the heck is this person on that list?
Yep.
This person does so much work. Like, do they not realize, and it's all just who who you're aligned with. Sometimes, not all the time, obviously, but I've definitely experienced that. I mean, that's created quite a number of my stomach issues over the years, for sure. And sleepless nights and migraine headaches and all those things, because you feel like you should be able to impact and get the outcome that's the most fair. And sometimes you just can't.
And that's exhausting, trying to figure out the political aspect of an organization and figure out, okay, what needs to happen and who do I need to talk to, because this person is instrumental in this department or whatever the case may be. Who do I need to talk to get them off this list? And even then, it doesn't always work.
And then sometimes, and I will always say this, sometimes you have to just save yourself. Because sometimes when you're advocating for other people, it puts you in the line of fire. And I know I've gotten precariously close at times to endangering my own position, and then realizing I had to stop.
Yeah.
So I will always save myself. I always tell everybody, be clear about this.
You do tell everybody that.
If it comes down to you and me, it's me. Okay.
Day 1 of employment here, Regina. She lays it on the line.
So to wrap our discussion up today, what signs should HR professionals look for in themselves that might indicate they're experiencing PTSD? And what personal advice can you give those HR professionals?
I could speak for myself. I mean, just emotional exhaustion, insomnia, paranoia. Sometimes I didn't use this as an example, but prior to this, Chelsey and I were talking about just, major betrayal, that you have at work, and just how, it's so hard to overcome that. Sometimes difficulty setting boundaries, when you're trying to do too much. Obviously the physical symptoms that you have, ulcers and acid reflux and, insomnia and headaches and neck pain, sometimes that would just where things manifest, Also HR specifically can be, not here because we're all HR people, but it's isolating.
It can be very isolating.
Absolutely.
In some companies. And there's some days at the end of the day where my brain can no longer formulate thoughts like what to cook for dinner. If you need help from your homework, I'm not the right parent to ask. And it's just, I have emotionally exhausted every piece of my brain power. And I think being able to say, I need a mental health day and I need to take a day off to regroup is important for people to utilize. In Colorado, we have a Healthy Families and Workplace Act. So utilize those sick hours or your PTO time for mental health to regroup and rest. And
if you have an EAP, use the EAP.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's such an underutilized benefit. I use it every year.
Yeah, I think that when Regina said, she'd save herself, I think that's what you need to do, right? Is just save yourself, because HR is the linchpin for a lot of things, and we hold a lot of things together. And without us being able to be there, the company isn't going to function as well as it needs to, right? And so you need to accept that about yourself, and you also need to realize that you need to condition yourself and you need to care for yourself. And so use the EAP, step away, but sometimes just say no.
Put your oxygen mask on first.
I was going to say the same thing.
Beat you. Finally, we're going to go to our segment, Ask HR, where we go to the online forum and answer a question. This question from Tennessee reads, I have about a month more seniority than my coworker, who is 34 years older than me. In June, she took a 2-week cruise, which I had to cover for. I know it's not my business, and I wouldn't normally care, but the long vacation becomes relevant soon. I got engaged last year, and in April, I requested PTO from August 24th to September 1st for my bachelorette, wedding, and honeymoon. Additionally, everyone has known about my wedding. I've been telling everyone. On Tuesday, August 6th, a manager and another associate informed me my coworker requested time off from August 25th to August 31st. Since it was last minute and the system blocked it, she had to go through the manager. The manager then told me I couldn't take my vacation because I'm the only person who can cover for this employee. I reminded her that I have seniority, requested time off months in advance, and am getting married. The manager told me the other employee will be getting the time off as she is much older and very tired and needs to recoup. I pointed out that she just took a 2-week vacation recently. The manager said it wasn't my business and I should cancel my vacation and reschedule my wedding or face termination. What can I do in this situation?
I would face termination and take my time off to get married.
That is crazy. Like, this almost doesn't even seem like a real story. We're assuming it is, but that's crazy. Reschedule your wedding. Like, there's years of planning sometimes that goes into a wedding.
Deposits.
People flying in from other states sometimes. Like, what a bizarre, okay, let's go back to the HR response. When there is not a formal process for equitably assigning PTO, or if the manager is not going to follow whatever process is established, you're never going to get a good business outcome. This person, he or she, needs to start immediately looking for another job and risk termination. They will get unemployment. There's no way they won't, especially if they have the documents of submitting the time. And I definitely would recommend they follow up with an email confirming what they're asking. So I'd have that for my records. So just to be clear,
I have seniority, and I put in this request first.
For my wedding. Hopefully once in a lifetime wedding.
And honeymoon and bachelorette party.
Right. And then not even taking a lot of time.
It's like a week.
I was like, that's hardly any time. It's like a 2-day honeymoon, maybe.
Yeah, I would definitely put this in writing.
That is crazy.
Well, and it's hitting on, most handbook or PTO policies either have seniority, like whoever's senior in the organization, they'll receive the PTO approval first. Or if it's first come, first serve.
But he did both of those things.
Yeah, I know.
This is crazy.
Agreed.
Well, and then the other employee too, could easily, if they just need to rest, they can rest any of the days that aren't those 7 days of the year.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah, it's like, it almost seems like they want this person to quit. They're doing this on purpose. Like, it just seems too outlandish to be. It's not. This is not reasonable. Like, there's no version of this that's reasonable.
Allow me to repoint out that this was on Tuesday, August 6th. They told her she needs to recoup at the end of the month.
If I was this particular employee, I would go to the employee as requested off the same time and say, listen, I am taking off. I requested these days to these days. I'm happy to cover you when I get back, but what can we do so we can both accommodate our PTO requests?
I would not talk to this other employee.
No.
You think they didn't know that this person's getting married and this was going to happen? They knew this. They don't care.
Well, it says that
I don't like her.
Okay.
Or he. I don't know.
Everyone has known about my wedding is a quote from the post.
Right.
So.
It says she took a 2-week cruise. Okay, so it is a she.
Gotcha. She's just living her best life, using up all of her PTO, maybe.
Right.
Totally get it.
Yeah.
Totally get it. But no, that's not this. I think we talked about a similar situation a long time ago.
I think you're referring to the resignation one where someone was working at a Rainforest Cafe in college, and they're like, I just need this weekend off.
Oh, yeah.
Like 6 months in advance. And they're like, no, I'm not doing that.
Well, they're not going to be employed there. This is a wake-up call for this employee. They don't have to quit. They don't have to jeopardize their income or cause additional stress to themselves. I am going to be taking this time. I did talk to my lawyer, or whatever you want to say. Depending on what their situation is, we don't know what their age is or any other information. They may want to consider filing an EEOC PTSD claim because this seems like it could be potentially discriminatory.
Well, and it makes you wonder what the manager's management capabilities are too, right? If they can't strategically plan for two people to be out at the same time, you know,
Right. Right. You cover the work.
Right. Exactly.
You know, I mean, if you can't keep both employees happy and you're at risk of losing one, that's why I think they're trying to get this person to quit.
I agree.
They don't want him to come back from the wedding or.
I agree. I would definitely start looking, and if they say no, you have to be to work, just call in sick every day or get a doctor's note for the duration for mental health.
They're in Tennessee.
Yeah, they don't have as many protections.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank Chelsey for joining us and giving us your insights. We really appreciate your time.
Yes, thanks for joining, Chelsey.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, guys.
And of course, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed your time with us, please subscribe and leave a review. If you have any HR stories or questions to share, message us on Instagram at hr.stew. I'm Holly.
And I'm Regina.
And we will see you next time on HR Stew.